Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Small Town Big Business, a podcast about doing big business in small towns across the Midwest. I am your co-host for today, Deb Barnett, also with Southern Illinois Now, which is economic development for the 17 southernmost counties in Illinois.
And I'm Russ Williams. I'm director of EThOs at the Citadel. We're a small business incubator, co-working spaces, training and development here in downtown Marion. In fact, you're joining us at the 110-year-old Citadel building, which is one of the downtown revitalization projects here in Marion. Thank you for joining us today, and thank you to our sponsors for supporting the Small Town Big Business podcast. Thank you in particular to Arcadia Wealth Group, Black Diamond Harley Davidson and RV, the Swinford Media Group, Fowler Heating and Cooling, Watermark Alder Group Foundation, and Union Street Arts.
And if you're new to the podcast, you can find us on any of the podcast platforms, and you can also find us on our YouTube channel. Just search Small Town Big Business and be sure to subscribe for free so you don't miss any upcoming episodes. We have a couple of years of episodes there that be sure to take a look at. They're all fantastic. On Small Town Big Business, we interview small business owners and founders about why and how they're successful in small towns. And today we're going to take a little bit of a shift because we're not necessarily interviewing a small business owner, but really talking about outdoor recreation and how that helps grow small business in our communities. And I'd like to welcome Brian Croft from SIU's Touch of Nature. So welcome.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm excited.
I'm excited today. As I mentioned, you're from SIU, Southern Illinois University here in Carbondale, which is just about 20 miles away from where we're at here in Marion at the Citadel building. But tell us a little bit, before we jump into Touch of Nature and all things outdoors, tell us a little bit about Brian.
Oh, well, that's a loaded question. So I came to school. I came to SIU because I knew exactly what I wanted to do, which is I was going to be in television and radio.
Oh.
Yep, you're following me. And then I knew I was going to be in cinema. And then I knew I was going to be in music. Then I knew I had no idea what I wanted to do. Mm-hmm. And I was broke and I needed to find a job. And so this is all to say kind of what got me here is I was an outdoor kid, but I wasn't the type of outdoor kid that went to national parks or those kind of things. I was the outdoor kid that had a creek in my backyard.
And where was that backyard?
I was in southern central Illinois, so Teutopolis, Illinois, T-Town, outside of Effingham. That's right. Go Wooden Shoes. That's our mascot. We were the mighty Wooden Shoes.
Yeah.
Fear the shoe. Anyway,
and it's a creek, not a creek.
Thank you for understanding that. I say that like Dawson had a creek. Brian had a creek. All right. Very different experiences. But it was me, and it was almost like a movie, but like the neighborhood kids would come over and we would spend every weekend going outside. And the biggest decision we had was like, are we going to go right or are we going to go left on the creek?
Right.
Mm-hmm. And whether it was, tree houses or forts or mud fights or whatever, I grew up outside. But then like a lot of people, I was like, well, I have to grow up and get a real life job. And again, in those situations when I found I had nothing, there was nothing for me to do, I had to pay my rent. And so I got a job taking people outside. And it was a glorified camp counselor at the age of 20. And then I realized this is actually really cool. And so who I am is sort of a guy who really just wants to get people outside. And so whether that's my work, at SIU and Touch of Nature, or whether it's just kind of promoting the outdoor opportunities that we have here in Southern Illinois, like somebody came and said, hey, you're the outdoor guy. If that's my moniker, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's great.
Put that on a vest.
That's so fun.
So we talked about SIU Touch of Nature. I want to give you some time to provide a little bit of background into that. But when we started, we said, usually this podcast is talking with small business owners, but in many ways, Touch of Nature is a bit of a small business within the university. So
yeah, very much so.
That.
It's interesting because I grew up, both of my parents owned their own business, right? And so I got to see firsthand a lot of the struggles that go into, owning your own business, whether that's Saturdays and Sundays, nights, weekends, time, money, all of it, right? Mm-hmm. And so I kind of went, I was like, I'm never going to own my own business. It's way too much work. And then I got into the nonprofit world and I was talking to my mom just the other day. I'm like, it's the same thing. Mm-hmm. And what I think when I say it's the same thing, it's for me, it's the passion. And we were kind of talking about it's the passion that drives my work is the same passion that I think you have when you are a small business owner. You have this thing that you love and you want it to grow, but you also want to take care of it. And so my work at Touch of Nature, in the same way, is extremely similar, I think, to owning your own business, because it is a labor of love. It's not a 8 to 4:30 clock in, clock out. I get to create, and I get to grow, and I get to do these things. And I say, well, hey, wouldn't it be cool if Touch of Nature did this? And I kind of am in a position to put that together. So that's really cool.
So for those who aren't familiar with Touch of Nature, give us a little bit about what it is, and I think the origin of it. It's such an interesting story.
So Touch of Nature was kind of this idea. Every university kind of has that university president that kind of puts them on the map, right? And so for SIU, Carbondale, it was Delight Morris. And Delight Morris loved two things. Well, he loved a lot of things, but two things in particular. He loved the outdoors. He was a huge, avid outdoor person. And he loved the idea of experiential learning. And so he said, what if we created a place that both highlighted sort of the Southern Illinois region, specifically the outdoor piece, but then also provided this outdoor kind of experiential laboratory. So whatever students are learning in the classroom, they can then come out to Touch of Nature and apply it in sort of this service mentality. So for example, if we were going to have a camp, well, maybe the education students would have it built into their curriculum where they would come and help facilitate the camp experience, all while providing these really cool experiences for the Southern Illinois community. And so that really is the basis, is we are the experiential laboratory for SIU. So much so that back in the day, the practice football field for Carbondale's football team was at Touch of Nature. It's still there. The goalposts are still up. And so they would actually come out and they would practice, and then in the evening time, they were our camp counselors in the evening time, and that was part of being on the football team. So historically, though, we're extremely well known for our work with in inclusive recreation and therapeutic recreation. So a lot of people don't know that we were the first collegiate-sponsored camp for people with disabilities. We weren't the first camp for people with disabilities, but we kind of became the experts and the training center. So if you were a park district or a community that wanted to provide these experiences to your community but didn't know how, you would come to Southern Illinois, and you would come to Touch of Nature, and you would literally be trained. And we actually were partially funded by the Kennedy Foundation. They saw what was happening, loved it so much that they, in essence, worked with our director at the time, who was Dr. Bill Freeberg, and they went up in 1968 to start the first Special Olympics at Soldier Field in Chicago. So if you look at the origin of this now international thing, it all kind of started in what I call the backyard of SIU at Touch of Nature.
It's incredible.
If one of our listeners or watchers has never been to Touch of Nature, how would you describe that experience? What's the property like?
So we have 3,100 acres. So if you're not familiar with an acre is about the size of a football field. Yeah. So we got 3,100 football fields and an actual football field out there. But we have two camps. What we do is we kind of break up our programs into outdoor education, which is working primarily with pre-K kids all the way up through 12th grade. We have a campus outdoor program. We do a really cool program called Dog Days in that, where we bring incoming freshmen out for like a 4-day, 3-night summer camp experience. Because the number one thing you can do to set up a college student for success is help them establish community. And what better way to do that than by camp, right? And so Dog Days has been extremely successful. We have our inclusive recreation program. So that houses our Camp Little Giant. We actually just had Camp Beta, which is our partner camp with SIH, where we serve kids with type 1 diabetes. And we're getting ready in about a month and a half to host our inclusive hunt, which is the largest hunt for people with disabilities in the state of Illinois. Wow. And then we also do community programs. So, we've got our Little Grassy Get Down Music Festival, our Haunted Hollow Halloween program, our Maple Fest. We have our mountain bike trails and all kinds of stuff. So again, our mission is just to get people outside. And so however we do that, whether it's through a music festival or whether we do it through a tree ID hike, it's just getting people outside.
Do you draw mostly people from Southern Illinois, from the state of Illinois, all across the country? What's your audience?
It's interesting. It depends on the program. So, and a lot of our outdoor ed programs, actually, we pull schools from St. Louis, Peoria, and Chicago. For our inclusive recreation program, we have campers all the way from Texas to California and everywhere else. And then our community programs are, pretty local, but I think we're starting to see our our geographic region that we're pulling from grow. Our mountain bike trails, for example, there's a lot of cool data, but basically the amount of trails you have kind of dictates how far people will travel. And for every 10 miles of trail, people will travel about 2 hours to get there. So that is our goal event. So we have 12 miles now, and the goal is eventually 30. And so you figure with 30 miles, we can have a 6 to 7 hour travel radius for folks to come here. And so you think 6 hours from Southern Illinois, that pulls in a lot of major urban populations. So,
And that's rather new development for Touch of Nature.
Yes.
I'm a bike rider, so I was very excited to see that coming.
And I think what people don't realize about mountain biking is there's this weird perception, right? That you have to like chug a Mountain Dew and then hit some sweet jumps. I know this is a podcast, but if you can see me, you'll realize that like this doesn't do jumps. If at any point both of my wheels are in the air, it's a bad day.
Yeah.
And mountain biking is this cool thing where it grows with you. So it's kind of like skiing, I tell people. Like you see people skiing in their 60s and 70s, and that's because you choose the trail. So mountain biking is just like skiing. It's like you have green trails, you have blue trails, and you have black trails. And so I steer clear of the black trails because I'm not as bouncy as I used to be when I hit the ground. But it's one of those things where it's very adaptable to your age, your skill set, your physical ability, which is something I really love about it.
Right. Those trails that are being developed and currently at Touch of Nature, that's just part of a larger tourism plan too, I think. Can you talk more about how that plays?
Well, I think that's the piece. And so, speaking of like tourism, like I was thinking about this the other day. I actually, I was lucky enough to give a TED Talk kind of about sort of the benefits of outdoor experiences.
I was there.
And sorry about that. No, but the idea was, what I tried to tell people is that, going back to COVID, right? Kind of our whole idea of what was important and what wasn't important, it kind of causes us to shift a little bit our mindset. And even things like what can we live with and without? And I mean, the stock market closed, which kind of shows like, okay, maybe that's not as important as we thought it was, but grocery stores stayed open. And the outdoors stayed open. And so what COVID allowed, I think, us to do, but a lot of people to do, is kind of realize like how beneficial these outdoor experiences are. I mean, the outdoors during COVID kind of helped reintroduce us to the outdoor world. I mean, we were stuck inside, and then even reintegrating with people, like it was those backyard parties where everyone kind of sat in a circle but 6 feet apart, and it helped kind of reintroduce us. And so although COVID was horrible for a lot of reasons, I think it helped people kind of find a reappreciation for the outdoors. And from a tourism perspective, I think you see a lot more families, mine included, saying, hey, as opposed to going to Disney World, like let's go camping. Let's go fishing. Let's do those kind of things. And so you sort of see this staycation kind of model where let's drive 4 hours and go someplace, as opposed to, jumping on a plane and going these other places, which I think for us in Southern Illinois provides this amazing opportunity from an economic development standpoint to really capitalize on that.
Yeah. I love your TEDx talk, by the way, just on record here.
He said it. Don't erase that from the podcast. That's in there.
So speaking of tourism, I brought some numbers today just about tourism here in Southern Illinois, because as you mentioned, we have so many opportunities for all things outdoors. We'll talk about those in a second, but 12% increase last year, 2022, in Southern Illinois tourism. More than 5,628 direct jobs related to that industry. So when we talk about small business in the region, and they're, our major job creators, I mean, looking at tourism, that's a huge piece. $35.1 million in local taxes. So that helps support our communities. So talk a little bit about, I know you and I serve on different committees and are in conversations about really what outdoor recreation means for Southern Illinois, and helping not only the small businesses that are here, but helping to attract new small business, helping to grow small business. Talk a little bit about your thoughts on that and your vision.
So, it all stemmed, one of the biggest changes, or one of the best things that have happened to the outdoor industry in the past 10 years was that we started to become included in the GDP. Right. So if you're not familiar with the GDP, that's the gross domestic product. And that's kind of how we measure our goods. Right. And so the outdoor industry now makes up almost 2% of this nation's GDP. 2%. And that's a huge chunk. And so I think what that allowed people to do is realize like this isn't just like this is a career. So I have 2 degrees in outdoor recreation, but unfortunately, outdoor recreation is one of those things where we call it a discovery major. Like rarely does anyone come to a school and be like, I'm going to be an outdoor rec major. But if you think about it, like it's this huge field. And so part of what we're trying to do is kind of say like, hey, this is a growing field and we need people to come and help us. And so, with that growing GDP, you look at sort of what makes Southern Illinois like this incredible region. And there's a lot of reasons, but we were talking about from an outdoor lens, we're the perfect blend of access and affordability. Right. So if you think about access to the outdoors, I'm sure your mind can go to, Boulder or anywhere, Colorado, or, the Northwest, the Pacific Northwest, and all these beautiful places, and even the Southeast. And those are all great. But look at the cost of living there. And so I'm not saying that Southern Illinois, I'm not saying that Southern Illinois is the same as, Mount Rainier in Washington. But what we are is this perfect blend of access and affordability. There is not another place in the Midwest that you can do it all. You can go biking, mountain biking, rock climbing. We've got trails, we've got paddling, we've got hunting, we've got fishing, we've got a national forest. Those places and the access to them. So a lot of people know this from a climbing perspective. I used to climb a lot in the Red River Gorge in Kentucky, and it's beautiful. But you have to have a 4-wheel drive to get to it, right? And then you're driving 2 hours in the middle of nowhere, no restaurants, no anything. You park your car, and then you have about a 45-minute hike to the actual place that you're climbing. And then I think about taking people climbing at Giant City or Fern Cliff, which just opened up 50 new rock climb routes.
And both of those are within just about 20 miles,
exactly.
20 minutes from here.
And the idea is like that you can park, there's a bathroom right there, and it's a 2-minute walk to these climb sites. So again, understanding that access piece and the affordability piece, we just have this incredible opportunity. And I'm the one kind of holding the sign saying, outdoor friends, please come help me. Because, I think if you are interested in both the outdoors and starting your own business, I think the potential for development in that industry here as a business owner is huge.
Yeah. And again, the transportation access is interstates and airports and trains, and that just doesn't exist in those other places that you talk about. It's a lot harder to get to. So.
And I think you're talking. We have interstate now with the new flights coming in, to the airport with the multimodal center. Where we can get people here. And so that idea of you can hop on a train, a bus, a flight, and get here within a day, or sometimes less than 4 hours from Chicago, St. Louis, Paducah, all of these other places. That's awesome.
Are you seeing a lot of people who are retirees? Those folks that because I think of recreation, I think of young people. No. It's people my age and older.
It is. And I think that's this cool thing. They did Deb was actually cool enough. She sent me a podcast, and I was listening to it the other day. And they looked at software engineers who all work remotely, right? And they asked why Utah. There was a large group of populations. Why did you choose Utah? Because you could do your job anywhere in the country. And they said, well, because if I'm going to work remotely, to have access to all of these outdoor spaces is amazing. And so I actually can see that, in our region, is people coming here who just maybe work remotely, but realize, again, affordability and access is amazing. And so can we really harness that and really put that out there to be like, hey, this is not only a great place to work and do business, but it's also a great place to retire.
Absolutely. So you mentioned Prime for new small businesses development. So speaking of development, depending on when this airs, there was a major announcement here in Marion just a few weeks ago. So this would have been in September of 2023. And I won't dive deeply into that. We'll let the developers talk about that in another conversation. But Oasis Outdoors Destination Project. So all things outdoors, from ATVs, RVs, test track, baseball, softball, pickleball, driving range facility, you name it, it's coming here to Marion. and truly intended to transform not just Marion, but the entire Southern Illinois region. So that really, as you mentioned, just that piece alone is so huge and has potential to draw additional business to this region specific to the outdoors.
Well, think about the concept of the outdoors, right? So I could go and I could talk to 10 different groups and say, do you like the outdoors? And they'll say, yes. And then I'll say, what do you like? And for some people, it's hunting and fishing. For other people, it's backpacking. For other people, like the wine trail experience is an outdoor recreational experience. And so the cool thing about the outdoors, it's one of those things that, is kind of, it's not a political thing. It's both sides of the party like outdoor experiences. And so it's one of the few things that actually kind of unify us when a lot of other stuff might, be a little bit more divisive. Like the outdoors is actually this really cool unifying idea. And so, the idea that, the development that's happening in Marion with Oasis and the RVs and the camping and the fishing and all that stuff, if we can find a way to then partner it with the backpacking, the hiking, the rock climbing, the paddling, and all of that stuff, it's like we literally are a one-stop shop for anyone. We're like who's an outdoors person, whether they're more in the hunting, fishing game, whether they're more in the backpacking, climbing, whatever kind of game. So.
Yeah. I think that's what Mayor Apsher does so well too, in looking at the region as a whole and seeing, really encouraging communities, our small towns that surround the Marion area to say, where do you fit into this puzzle? What is your vision for this? And where can you help move all of this forward?
And I'm not just saying this because you're sitting next to me, but it's also what I love about SI Now is looking at yes, we do obviously from a regional and a community standpoint, what is Jackson County, what is Williamson, what is Marion, what is Carbondale, Murfreesboro, all these other things, but then how do we fit into this puzzle piece? And so kind of what I'm saying is one of the, if the puzzle is outdoor recreation, well then how does each community, fit into that? Right. The folks at Harrisburg, and their access to the Shawnee over there. But I mean, you look at the Shawnee National
Garden of the
Forest,
Gods.
right? And but then on the other side, you've got, the Rupine Hills that's on the other side of the Shawnee. And so, I think we can have several sort of places where you can access these outdoor places.
Yeah. So what are the challenges for us to continue to develop the outdoor tourism?
I think it's establishing that it is. So I almost consider myself sometimes on an educational tour of no, this is a thing. And obviously every business owner does it because they care, but they want to make sure that they're going to be taken care of. So it is also a financial, it's an opportunity. It's not just an act of service. And I think a lot of the data that we talk about with the GDP and the growing industries, it is a really good investment. I think that there are some things we've talked about access, right? Well, so if you look at the outdoor industry puts out a report, and one of the things they talk about, what are the barriers? What are keeping people from participating in the outdoors? And some of it is I don't have anyone to go with. Some of it is I don't have the equipment. To do whatever it is, and I don't have the instruction or those type of things. And so how do we address, as an industry, let's say you are a family from Chicago, and you want to come down here and you heard we have great mountain bike trails. Well, okay, first we got to figure out how are you going to get to Touch of Nature from the airport? So really boosting our, public transportation, our ride shares and things like that. Where are you going to stay? Obviously we have a lot of really great Airbnbs, but I think, Marion and Carbondale, Murfreesboro, some of these larger communities have an opportunity to, Airbnbs, hotel, lodging, and really kind of advertising there. That's key. And the other thing is then who's going to take you? Right. So I hear rock climbing is really cool, but here's the thing about rock climbing. You don't watch a YouTube on how to rock climb and then go get the stuff.
Or that's probably not a good idea.
Yeah, please do not
you
do
can,
that.
But
ironically, during COVID, I was teaching a rock climbing class. And so when they said, hey, you got to take all of your classes and make them, you have to make them online. I don't know if you've ever taught an online rock climbing class. And so at the end of the class, I was it is very important for you all to know, do not go and do this right now. I did my best, but please don't go rock climbing on your own. But I think, guides, outfitters, gear stores.
Those are all small businesses waiting to happen,
yes.
right?
And I would not be doing myself, and Deb knows what's coming. The number one activity to get people into outdoor sports, especially the adventure type outdoor sports, is an indoor climbing wall.
Yeah.
And so I kind of say it all the time. Climbing is this huge growing kind of sport. It's in the Olympics now. And we are in sort of this climbing wall desert where they've got a couple in St. Louis, they've got one in Champaign, they've got one in Evansville, but there's about a 2 to 3 hour driving radius where we don't have it.
That's a good point.
So again, there's a really cool research study that says if you don't have a quality outdoor education experience before the age of, I think it's 10, it's either 10 or 12, the likelihood of you liking the outdoors dramatically decreases. And so I often ask people, it's like, well, are you an outdoors person? Yeah. I'm like, tell me about like your like favorite outdoor memory as a kid. They always have one. And so part of it is we've got to find a way. And that's why I love the work that we do at Touch of Nature and why that pre-K to that 10-year-old spot is so important, because if I can get them to have an appreciation for nature, then that to me makes them wanting to stay in this community, realizing like, oh wow, I've got all of these opportunities. It makes it much more possible. So again, if you are a person that is interested in climbing, and if you want to build a climbing wall in Southern Illinois, come find me, and I will help you make it happen.
To knock out some floors here in this building, but
there you go.
85 feet, that'd be a good climbing wall.
We're going to talk. I'll save it for after the podcast. But do I have an investment for you?
Talk to the owner. That's awesome.
So for those who might not be familiar, we mentioned the Shawnee National Forest many times, 289,000 acres. Marion, I know, says they're the gateway to the Shawnee, as does most communities in Southern Illinois, because it just spans our entire region. So talk a little bit about, we've shared the business opportunities that exist, but there's also a preservation piece that goes along with that too, right? Can you talk about that?
So anytime you talk about outdoor spaces, there's sort of two concepts that you kind of have to divide. There's preservation and then there's conservation. And so at their root, like conservation is the greatest good for the greatest amount of people. And preservation is let's not touch it and let's protect it. So oftentimes when I ask people, like, what's your personal ethic on that? It's somewhere in the middle. Rarely are you 100% a preservationist, because that means like we're going to put a fence around it and no one's allowed to go in there, right? And then you have sort of the conservation piece, which is a little bit, like, well, let's use this and let's take advantage. And so I like to think of myself somewhere in the middle of that. And so we have this opportunity here, in the National Forest. It's such an accessible forest, and for a lot of people it's like their spot, right? And so I think that's the one thing that we're gonna have to address, is that if we promote outdoor tourism, like we're gonna have to give up a little bit of control over our spot. And for a lot of people that's a difficult kind of thing. Like this is my secret spot. Whether it's a cool waterfall that nobody knows about, or that kind of stuff. But to me, the trade-off is, I think just a growing region with new opportunities, new, a better quality of life. If you look at it, there's just about nothing that you can do as a community to improve quality of life. Funding and supporting outdoor recreation opportunities is one of the number one things you can do, whether you're a mayor or a city manager or things like that. And that's why you're seeing all of this kind of commitment to the outdoors, whether that's, towns are putting in bike paths, or they're putting in, these cool trails inside of the city. And I think it's because they realize that like those outdoor experiences have a direct correlation to sort of our quality of life.
Absolutely.
So be a little bit more clear too. What's the connection between small town communities and Touch of Nature? What can we partner with? What do we need to be doing? Well,
I think for a lot of us, it's coming out. It's in the same way Touch of Nature is a lot like a small business. How often do we pass a small business and I'm like, I love that we have that restaurant. When was the last time you ate there? It's been about 2 years, but it was really, really good. So Touch of Nature is kind of the same way. So sometimes just coming out and using our facilities, using the mountain bike trails, coming to our Haunted Hollow Halloween event or Maple Fest or things like that.
That's event space.
Yes, and we do have event space. So
and lodging,
and we have lodging. So it's a great we do a lot of corporate retreats. People will come out because you teach leadership. Sometimes it's about getting people out of the space. You're not going to go into their business. Right. And so the idea is, how do I get you a little bit out of your comfort zone? And part of that is actually removing you from the space. Yeah. And so for some people, like just coming out to Touch of Nature and sort of being immersed in the outdoors. And we even talk about that, our mission is to enhance the lives of all people through outdoor experiences. But sometimes, you can have an outdoor experience inside just by the way your building is designed or where your building is located, or just the walk through the woods to get to the building. So just come out and use this. We're always looking. We do a lot of school groups. So if you're a parent or a teacher, a lot of places. Did either of you have sort of that like 5th through 8th grade outdoor field trip, right?
Absolutely.
And fortunately and unfortunately, like those are harder and harder to do. And so keep pushing, because those experiences, again, going back to what I said about the research, like quality outdoor experiences before the age of 10 and 12. So not only is that a quality experience for them as a student, but again, you're instilling that sort of appreciation of the outdoors, which, ultimately as an adult leads to hopefully an affinity for our region.
Do you have a lakefront there, and what's the amenities on the lakefront?
So we're on Little Grassy Lake, which is part of the Crab Orchard Refuge. There's 3 lakes. The cool thing about our lake is to have property. You sort of have to have an outdoor education, environmental ed piece to your mission. So it's a lot of camps, and then there's some wilderness, designated wilderness, and state parks and other things. So you go canoeing on Little Grassy Lake, and you feel like you are in the boundary waters, which is really, really cool. So you can rent the lake space, but again, we open it up for a lot of our events. We do summer camps. We kind of do it all. So the best thing you do is just go to our website.
That is?
ton.siu.edu, which I find funny because sometimes I'm just like, or just Google Touch of Nature. We're the only one.
So TON for touchofnature.siu.edu.
Yep.
Okay.
Excellent.
Very good. Brian, what is your why? What gets you up every day?
Well, usually it's my 4-year-old jumping on my head. But, for me, it's just I love the outdoors, but not because I love the outdoors. And I say this when I teach in outdoor recreation. I was like, why do you want to be in outdoor recreation? And people say, I love being outside. And I go, well, I spend about 90% of my time inside, and I have 2 degrees in outdoor recreation. But I love what the outdoors does for people, right? Whether it's physical health, whether it's mental health, whether it's bringing a group together. I don't teach about the outdoors, we teach through the outdoors. And so it's this really cool space to help people grow, to address their own personal needs. And so for me, it really is. I feel like I have the solution to a lot of society's problems, which is just go outside. But then also understanding that there are things like access issues and other things. And so how, if my whole career, and if I'm known as the person that got people outside in Southern Illinois, like put that on my tombstone, like that's pretty cool.
That's pretty cool.
Love it.
Is there a question that we forgot to ask you or you'd like to answer?
Man, probably. I zoned out. Like this whole thing, it's like, this is a great conversation. I don't know if you guys are doing this, but we should just do this more. No, I think it's just pushing the idea that like it's gonna take a team, right?
Yeah.
And so I think the development you talked about in Marion and the folks, but there's and they're there. There are people that are sort of just have dedicated themselves to the outdoor industry, specifically in Southern Illinois. But I think it's coming together and putting together, you referenced the puzzle, putting together that puzzle of what are we missing? And thinking outside the box too, because again, it's not just, a lot of people want to say, well, our state parks are free. Yeah, but we have transportation issues, we have equipment issues and those kind of things. So where are we missing, or what don't we have? And then how do we as a region either do it ourselves or convince people like, hey, this is like, again, if you want to start a climbing wall, I can tell you there is no better place than Southern Illinois. And I say Southern Illinois as a region because people will also travel. So, I mean, whether it's in, Harrisburg, Murphy, the whole 13 corridor, or even up Mount Vernon and down, like people will travel to that. And again, that's a piece, we talked about things like if you, destination management is one of the things that the podcast referenced, and sort of this, okay, if we know we want to be this outdoor destination hub, there are things, outdoor people like to be outside. So whether that's outdoor coffee shops or outdoor dining or, even like I want to see a band, but I want to do it outside.
Yeah.
Like, so how do we kind of just put this stuff across the region so that, really, we can attract people. And again, we have the bandwidth to do it because, again, like you talked about the Shawnee National Forest, it covers the entire southern piece of the state. So, even looking at the Route 13 corridor from Harrisburg to Murfreesboro, like you can access the Shawnee. And so there's a place for each of those communities to kind of tie into that.
You have beautiful spaces there too. Have we forgot anything? We're good. Do you have any more questions?
I think I'm good.
Okay, great. Well, Brian Croft, Executive Director for the Touch of Nature at SIU, thank you so much for joining us.
This is a blast.
I appreciate more men with beards on this podcast.
Beards. So the outdoor industry, we do beards, vests, and puffy coats.
Yeah, okay.
So if you're walking around and you see either a beard, a vest, or a
There
puffy
you
coat,
go.
if you're looking for other outdoor people, like those are your people.
Those are your people.
I love it. More masculinity on the podcast today. I appreciate that. That's great. So, hey, thank you to everyone for being part of our small town, big business community by listening and watching our podcast. Thanks again to our sponsors for making this possible. And thank you to Arcadia Wealth Group, Black Diamond Harley Davidson and RV, Fowler Heating and Cooling Company, Swinford Media Group, Watermark Auto Group Foundation, and our producer, Union Street Arts. Look for Luke O'Neill at Union Street Arts. He's a great podcast producer and does wedding photography and a lot of other things too. If you want to know more about EThOs, so you want to start a small business, you want to see your business grow, you can reach out to me. We have co-working spaces. We have training and development for businesses. I'm Russ Williams, and you can contact me at russell@watermarkethos.org or look for us on Facebook. It's EThOs at the Citadel at Tower Square Plaza.
Yeah, and I'm Deb Barnett with Southern Illinois Now. Again, you can find us at southernillinoisnow.org or on any of the social media platforms, looking at economic development, all of the things we've talked about today for the 17 southernmost counties in Illinois. If you are looking to listen to more of Small Town Big Business, again, you can find us on any of your podcast platforms, also on our YouTube channel. Just be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss any upcoming episodes. So again, I'm Deb Barnett. Great to be with you today.
I'm Russ Williams. Thanks for joining us.